The 638th edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
Elton ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered Marvin. He scores. 17 seconds left. And he was fouled. Here we go. Lawson with a runner. No. The rebound. Hansbrough at the gun. Got it.
They were 4 for 24.
Hansbrough on a switch on Paulus. A deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Tipped away by Johnson. It's loose. Page. Johnson.
They're dancing in the aisles. They're high-fiving. They're celebrating. They're going bananas on Franklin Street.
Pass to Britt, 15 seconds to play. Up high to Page, gets a screen from Meeks. Page driving in on the left, high off the glass for two. Louisville with 7 seconds. Jones has it, goes left corner, Black's here for three. Back iron, 1 second to play, stick up, no! Carolina wins it! The Tar Heels win it! 72-71. 6 seconds to go. Pinson comes front court. Pinson to May for the win. Got it! Luke May! He got it! 0.3 of a second! Luke May gives Carolina the 75-73 lead. Are you kidding me?
Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome into another edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony back with you guys here on a Friday night, here to get you ready for Carolina SMU. That game will come your way tomorrow afternoon, Saturday, 2:15 start time over on the CW. And that's where Carolina will do battle for their second ACC game of the year and their first ACC road contest of the season. We'll tell you everything you need to know about SMU. Look at this game from the Carolina perspective. We have our discussion topic. We give our keys to the game, make our predictions, and so much more. But we start every edition of the pod, as we always do, with the pod thought of the day. We go to Roy Williams for that pod thought. And this comes from his book where he talks about playing road games, and it goes like this, quote, "I love playing road games. I encourage my players to treat games away from home as a wonderful challenge. I like to tell my team, let's go into their living room and steal their brownies. It's all about having the confidence and the attitude that I can beat your butt anytime, anywhere, any place, anyhow," end quote. And that's what Carolina's got to do tomorrow. This is a quad one game. SMU top 30 in the net. So a real good opportunity for Carolina to add to their NCAA tournament resume. If they win tomorrow, that'd give them 4 quad one wins. That would tie them for the most quad one wins of any team in all of college basketball, and would really further the conversation about them being a legitimate threat to at least make a Final Four, if not, win a national championship. And so you and I, look, we're two guys that you can tell by the way that we look. We love to eat brownies. And I prefer the edges more so than the center. Dump it in a nice cup of milk, and it's as good as any dessert out there. Hopefully this team is ready to go on the road and steal some brownies. But to do so, they're going to have to play at a really high level, because this SMU team, it's really, really good.
Yeah, that's the one thing that I think might catch people off guard a little bit, is that this SMU team is as good of an offensive team as Carolina has seen maybe all year long. I know Michigan State was up there when Carolina played them, but this is a team that's averaging 91 points per game. so far this season. And I get it. Maybe they haven't played the most difficult schedule of anybody in the country, but at the same time, I mean, they're still scoring at a ridiculous rate. So Carolina's got to be prepared. This is a team that comes in here. They have a win over Texas A&M. They have a win over Mississippi State. I mean, none of those, neither one of those look like anything big, but they do have a win over Butler. That's, I think, their biggest win that's on their schedule. And all those games, every single one of them, they scored at least 87 points or more. So this is a team that scores with just about everybody that they play with. That's going to be the expectation coming into this game as well. I mean, their last game out, now this is going to be their first conference game, so they've had a bit of a layoff here. But, their last game against Cal State Fullerton, they scored 110. So they're feeling it coming into this game against Carolina on the offensive end of the floor. And Carolina's got to be able to show up ready to go in this game. The road environment, I think, one thing that you kind of worry a little bit about when Carolina schedules the way that they scheduled in the non-conference this year is that they don't necessarily have as many trips on the road, but this team went into Lexington and found a way to win. So this should, be one of those games that you can draw back to that experience. You can draw back to the neutral site games that you played against Michigan State and St. Bonaventure, and can hopefully take something away from those matchups that allows you to be prepared for this matchup against a good SMU team.
Let's set the scene for tomorrow's game. Carolina 3-1 all-time against SMU. Last year was the first time they met as conference opponents. Carolina won that game going away in Chapel Hill. First time the two teams have played in Dallas since 1986, a game where current assistant Jeff Lebo scored 22 points for Carolina in the victory. This version of SMU, they bring with them an 11-2 record into the game. They are 9-0 at home. They are 3-2 against power conference opponents. You mentioned the wins over Butler, at Mississippi State, and against Texas A&M. And their two losses are to a Vanderbilt team that, is going to be, I think, second weekend of the tournament good. And they lost to LSU. Not a loss to be, all that bashful about. They have 5 players that average double-figure scoring, led by Boopy Miller, who is still somehow playing college basketball. He averages 19.9 points per game, 3.5 rebounds, 7.1 assists. He is shooting 47% from the field, 43% from three. Jaron Pierre Jr. is their second leading scorer, 18.7 points, 5.3 rebounds, 1.8 assists. He is shooting 47% from the field, 33% from three. BJ Edwards is their third leading scorer, 13.5 points, 5.8 rebounds, 5.5 assists. He is shooting 46% from the field, 31% from three. And then Corey Washington is the last guy to average, or is their fourth double-digit score, 12.4 points, 5.8 rebounds, 0.7 assists. He is shooting 53% from the field, 36% from three. And then Samit Yigitulu is their last guy to average double figures, 11.5 points, 8.9 rebounds, 1.4 assists. He is shooting 64% from the field. Some averages that stand out about SMU. They average 91.1 points per game. That's 16th best in the country, second best in the ACC. And they do it the old school way. They do it by making a lot of 2-point field goals. They average 25 2-point field goal baskets per game, the fifth highest number in all of college basketball. Their KenPom rankings, they're 40th overall in KenPom. Their adjusted offensive efficiency rating of 120.7 is 27th. Their adjusted defensive rating of 102.4 is 74th. And they come into the game with a healthy ranking of 28th in the net. What stands out to SMU is the fact that they got 5 double-digit scores, and the fact that, look, can they take and make the three? Yes, they can. But this is much more of an old-school approach where they want to play inside out. They want to attack the paint and then really build their offense out that way. And so the Heels they're going to have their hands full with maybe the most potent offense they've seen so far this season.
Yeah, I mean, judging off of, the numbers, it definitely is. I don't know, if you would give Michigan State a little more credit because they play a much more difficult schedule. So maybe that's still the best offensive team that you face. But this team's going to be up there, man. I mean, you talk about how successful they are inside the arc. I think that certainly is something that should scare Carolina, because there have been teams so far this year, even in the non-conference against some of the lesser opponents, that have been able to get to their spots on the floor and score the basketball inside the arc. Hopefully Carolina can do a much better job of taking that away in this game. This needs to be a really strong defensive effort from Carolina all around, because that's the area that they're going to look to attack the most. They're going to try to attack that rim. They're going to try to attack, that foul line in. So Carolina's got to make sure that they take care of business in that area if they're going to win this game. The good news is that this team, while they do have the scorers, they don't necessarily have the size that Carolina has. In terms of their starting lineup, you do have Samit Yigatolu, who is 7'2". That's going to be a really interesting matchup between him and Henry Vassar down low. But outside of that, their next biggest guy in their starting lineup is 6'6". So Carolina is going to have the size advantage. That's something that you hope they're going to be able to take advantage of on the offensive end of the floor against a team that defensively, as you said, judging off of their KenPom ranking, not necessarily a great defensive team. They're not horrible, but they're certainly not great, and they have let up some points to some of the lesser teams. But when you play at the pace that they play, I guess that's just part of how they play. That's the thing, is that they are 21st in field goal attempts in the country. So this is another team that's going to want to play fast. Carolina's got to make sure that they're locked in and ready to go for that, because this is a team that wants to create a lot of possessions. So Carolina's got to take care of the basketball in this one, a team that averages 14.8 turnovers forced per game. That's 58th in the country, so not nearly as good as Florida State was coming in, but still, that's an area they do a pretty good job at, limiting those extra possessions for them, limiting offensive rebounds. Another area where they're pretty good, averaging 13.4 per game, which is 52nd in the country. That's something that Carolina's got to do a better job of than they did the other night if they want to find a way to win this game over SMU and do so comfortably.
You look at this game from Carolina's perspective, the Heels bring with them a 13-1 record. They are ranked 12th in the current AP poll. First 13-1 start since Carolina won the national championship back in 2008, 2009. Carolina just 1-0 in true road games this year, but that road win at Rupp Arena at Kentucky, something that should, give them preparation for the environment that they'll see on Saturday afternoon. The Heels have 4 players that are averaging double-figure scoring, led by Caleb Wilson, 19.8 points, 11.2 rebounds, 2.6 assists. He is shooting 56% from the field and 27% from three. Henry Vassar is their second leading scorer, 16.5 points, 9.4 rebounds, 2 assists. He is shooting 65% from the field, 50% from three. Seth Trimble, the third leading scorer, 15.6 points, 4.6 rebounds, 3.4 assists. He is shooting 44% from the field, 24% from three. And then Luka Bogovac, 10.3 points, 2.9 rebounds, 2.6 assists. He is shooting 39% from the field, 31% from behind the three-point line. Some numbers that stand out about Carolina: they are 8th in the country in defensive rebounds per game, 30.3. They are 3rd in the country in opponent field goal percentage at 36%. And they're 4th in the country in opponent two-point field goal percentage at 41%. They're 23rd overall in KenPom. Their adjusted offensive efficiency rating of 118.5 is 47th. Their adjusted defensive rating of 96.4, though, is 18th in the country. And speaking of 18, that's where they come in the net rankings. They're 18th right now in the net. So a quad one game for Carolina, a quad one game for SMU, which would really kind of give it a real big feel on Saturday afternoon, despite it being just the second ACC game for the Heels and the ACC opener for SMU. Let's get into our discussion topic. And you kind of mentioned this when we were kind of setting the scene for the game, but this is just Carolina's second true road game. They've got some neutral court stuff with, whenever St. Bonaventure a loss to Michigan State. They beat Ohio State on a neutral. But their only true road game was at Kentucky. Now you could argue as hostile an environment Carolina will play in all season long, maybe outside of their trip to Cameron. They got to go to NC State, maybe Virginia. But this is a game that is the first of 5 road games for Carolina in the month of January. This is a much more heavy laden part of the schedule in terms of road games for Carolina. You got a week off. You play Wake Forest at home next week. And then you got to make the West Coast swing where you got to go and play Cal and Stanford. And those are 2 improved basketball teams as well. We're used to seeing Carolina having played at least, a handful of road games by the time we get into conference play. We know we got the win at Kentucky, and I think that did kind of spark some confidence into this group, especially because they got that win without Seth Trimble. But ACC road openers are always tricky for Carolina. Just how prepared do you think this team is to go on the road and to kind of tie things back into the pod thought of the day, steal some brownies at SMU?
I mean, I think they are decently prepared. I think, when you look at the schedule that they had, this was one that was necessary for this year. Again, we talked about how last year, a big part of it was that Carolina played so many road and neutral site games. And when they lost those games, it really seemed to dash the confidence of that group, especially with the losses that you took in some of those neutral site games. And so Carolina wanted to go with a more home-heavy schedule this time around, a little bit of an easier non-conference schedule for them to sort of gain a little bit of confidence and get themselves rolling. I think that's ultimately what they were able to accomplish. And that's why you should feel pretty good about where Carolina is going into this game. The one road game that they played, as you mentioned, without Seth Trimble, and it was maybe their worst game that they played all year. Even, with the game against Michigan State, there were moments in that game where Carolina looked better than they did offensively against Kentucky. I mean, Kentucky was just downright bad on the offensive end at times in that game. And so Carolina was able to come away with a win in that one. So I think that's certainly something they can draw back to in this game if there are tough moments. This team, I mean, look, as bad as Kentucky has been this year, I don't think that SMU is quite as good as Kentucky. They certainly don't boast the same amount of talent as Kentucky does, but still they're going to provide a very decent challenge for Carolina. So it's just all about coming in prepared. I'm glad that this game was not the first conference game. If Carolina had to go on the road for the first conference game and the first game back from the winter break, I would be a little bit nervous, a little bit more nervous, I think, than I am going into this game, because I think Carolina was able to work some things out against Florida State, was able to get their legs back under them against the Seminoles. This is the type of opponent that now you have to follow it up with, where things are going to be a little bit tougher. We mentioned, we mentioned it a couple of times here on the podcast, but we've also talked about it a lot off air. This ACC is going to be a lot better this year than it was last year. So Carolina's got to be prepared for some tests along the way. This is one of them early on, but I think they're in a decent spot. And I think really the biggest thing is that you just feel confident with where this team is at right now. You feel confident in the form they're in and the way they're playing, that they're going to be able to find a way to come out with a victory in this one. Might not be the prettiest. They might not be able to blow them out, but certainly this is one that you should feel pretty decent about going in if you're a Tar Heel fan.
Look, there's something to be said about playing in road environments to prepare you to go play and win on the road. The most important thing, and why I think Carolina is equipped to navigate this, is they know who they are. Mm-hmm. They know what their identity is, something they did not know this time a year ago when they got into conference play, and that's why the team was as up and down as they were. This team knows its strengths. They know their weaknesses. And they've done a really good job for the most part playing to their strengths and hiding their weaknesses. And Hubert Davis has done a good job in game making the adjustments he's had to make to really position this team to come away with wins. That's the most important thing. Teams that go on the road and win, yeah, experience matters, but it really comes down to executing who you are and playing to the truest form of who you are as a basketball team. And I expect Carolina to do that tomorrow. I expect Carolina to pound the ball inside, to play through their two bigs, and really branch everything off of that. I expect them to be really competitive in the half court defensively, contesting a bunch of shots, getting to the board, looking to run off of misses, looking to run off of makes to generate some easy transition points. And so that's the most important thing. And that's what playing the schedule that Carolina plays affords you is, no, have you been in the environments that you're used to being in? That answer is no. But you also are able to cultivate an identity and know who you are and set a standard for how to play on a night in, night out basis that is just as equally as important as playing in some loud gyms. And so, while it'll be different, it'll be unique. The first ACC game for Carolina at SMU, no one's going to argue that Carolina is the more gifted team. They've got more talent than SMU. They probably feel just as good about their depth as SMU does. And, if all things are equal, a lot of things point to Carolina winning this game if they play as close to their identity as they can, even so on the road. So I think they're prepared, and hopefully they are, because you get this win, you get a week off, but you get a fourth quad one win this early on in the season, when we're starting to see Joe Lunardi, Jerry Palm, all these guys start putting together their brackets. Like, you got to start putting Carolina on that maybe not the 1 line, but the 2 and the 3 line. And that's what's different from Carolina from a year ago, from where they are right now. And this is what helps about the ACC being much better than it was a year ago. What Carolina's playing for is NCAA tournament seeding. Like, if you win the majority of these games, it's going to improve your resume. And these could be seed line games by the end of the regular season. But on the flip side, like, if Carolina loses tomorrow, you lose to a top 30 team in the net, I know there will be people overreacting and the sky's going to be falling. It's not a bad loss. Whereas last year you suffered losses at home and away from home that put yourself in that position down the stretch where you played really good basketball the back half of February into March, but you didn't really accomplish anything because there weren't any quad one wins there to be had. That's not the case starting with this game tomorrow. So if Carolina goes on the road and wins, like, okay, you celebrate the win, but then you're tied for the most quad one wins of any program in the country. There'd be 8 teams that have, at least 4 quad one wins. You're talking about Carolina starting to put themselves in that conversation to be a top 3 seed line come Selection Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is that you're looking at this as an opportunity to build a resume early on. And I mean, Carolina's already built a pretty good resume here out of the gate, even though, there have been some teams, we've talked a lot about Kansas and where exactly they would end up because of the Darren Peterson injury. They're still in a really advantageous position for Carolina. Hard to see them really dropping to a point where that game isn't at least going to be a debatable quad one win for most of the season. I mean, right now that team sits 16th in the net. So, I mean, they have to fall, top 30 at home. And so they've got to fall pretty decent amount there. Kentucky, even as bad as they've been at times this year, they're currently 27th in the net. So that's one that you would expect for sure is going to stay. That's the one you probably feel the most confident in. And then Ohio State. This is another one, though, when you look at it. I mean, SMU is 28th right now in the net ranking. And so if they end up, just having even a solid season, even if they're a team that's on the bubble, you would expect that their net ranking is going to stay above the top 75. And that's what you need to have for it to be a quad one victory when you go on the road. So I definitely think Carolina has a great opportunity here with this game. Some of the other games that Carolina is going to play, the rest of the way, there's, a quad one opportunity with a team like Cal. That's a loss that I wouldn't be, or a game rather, not a loss, a game rather, that, if Carolina ends up winning it, it's probably not going to end up being a quad one game when it's all said and done. This is one of those games, though, that I believe is going to remain a quad one game. And so you're right. Even if Carolina does lose for some reason, it's not a reason to panic. But at the same time, it feels like this is a great opportunity ahead of this team on Saturday in Dallas to be able to continue to build some early momentum. And I mean, you look at it, the game's coming up for Carolina. Quad 1 against SMU, Quad 2 against Wake Forest, Quad 2 against Stanford, Quad 1 against California, Quad 2 against Notre Dame. I mean, that's before you even get to the Quad 1 matchup against Virginia. There are a lot of really good opportunities here early on in this schedule, which is seen as the easier part of the schedule for Carolina. So a lot of chances to build a resume here for the Tar Heels. But this one certainly is one that I think Carolina wants to continue to build on what's been a great start to the year against a team in SMU that hasn't nearly been tested as much yet as some of the teams that Carolina is going to face once they get later on in conference play.
Let's talk about how Carolina can do just that. It's time for us to give our keys to the game. The first thing I wrote down was you gotta protect the paint. When you see SMU's 2-point field goal per makes per game, and that number is 25 2-point field goals they make on a nightly basis, I can assure you, even though they may play inside out, they're not out here shooting 16-foot mid-range jump shots. They are wanting to get the ball into the painted area and really look to attack that way. We've seen Boopy Miller a lot during his time, here at Wake Forest, and now his time at SMU. He's a guard that's going to want to penetrate, kind of a lot like the way that Fears at Michigan State does. He's going to want to just get the ball into the painted area, force the defense to collapse, and he'll be looking to dish because he averages 7 assists. And so, look, you know what you've got protecting the rim and Henry Vassar and Caleb Wilson. And look, those two guys are godsends considering the issues Carolina had guard or protecting the rim a year ago. This comes down to being tough enough to keep the ball in front of you, keep your man in front of you, and not get taken off the dribble and force the defense to collapse over and over and over again. And it's going to be difficult. Part of it is because SMU is going to look to run. They're going to look to push the pace. So Carolina's got to make sure they're sprinting back and getting their defense set, because it doesn't matter if it's a make or a miss. SMU is going to get the ball and they're going to look to go, but they're also just not going to not be aggressive, trying to set screens, get downhill, and attack. That's who they are. That's their MO. And so it's a good thing you have Seth Trimble back. He's your best perimeter defender. I would expect a lot of him on Boopy Miller in this ball game. You need Kyan Evans to be able to stay out of foul trouble, because I think when Kyan Evans is competing at a high level, it's what he's doing as a defender that really makes him valuable on the court. I think you'll see a lot of Jonathan Powell because he's a better on-ball defender than Luka Bogovac. Same thing with Jaden Young, who's kind of carved out a role off the bench for Carolina as well. But this cannot be a game where Carolina gives up, 40-plus points in the paint, because if they do, that would suggest to me that SMU just got to the rim too easy, too often, and converted too many times, and this defense might collapse, and this could be a game where SMU's offense just goes bonkers.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing, man, is you got to make sure that these guys aren't able to get to where they want to get to on the floor. It's very obvious that, as you said, in this day and age of the game, the mid-range game is certainly not something that you are drawing your offense up to do. Maybe you are able to knock down some shots in the mid-range. Maybe that is part of the reason why they've been so successful. This is a team that's going to be trying to get downhill and get to the basket. And those are teams that have caused Carolina a little bit of trouble. Michigan State is a great example of that. So that's a game that you got to learn from if you're Carolina, and make sure that you don't allow a repeat of that in this game. You said it, one of the things that I think we're going to see a lot of is a lot of screening action. Well, Carolina's got to be able to fight through some of those screens. You can't switch everything, because that's going to put you at a disadvantage at times. There are guys, the big guys on the perimeter, they can guard. There's no doubt about that. But you don't always want to be putting them in those situations throughout this game. I love Henry Vassar and what he does. I don't want him on Boopy Miller for most of the way in this game if they're going to put him in a lot of pick and roll situations, stuff like that. You want to make sure that you are, having the guys like Seth Trimble, like Kyan Evans, like Jonathan Powell on the right guys on the floor, on the guys that you want them to be on the floor. So I think that's going to be one of the main things that Carolina's got to be able to do in this game. And really, it's just about being strong enough to prevent these guys from getting where they want to go. You know, there have been times where teams have been able to push Carolina around a little bit. The guards have been very physical against Carolina and you know, end up getting to where they want to on the floor, whether it's to the basket or get into that mid-range area. Carolina's got to make sure that's not the case in this game. Cut off that lane, make things difficult for them, and force this team to have to settle for perimeter jump shots, because while they're not terrible as a perimeter shooting team, they certainly aren't as good as some of the other teams that Carolina has faced so far this season, like Florida State, or will face later in the season, like Louisville.
The second key I wrote down was Carolina's got to outplay their backcourt. And maybe outplay is asking too much. Maybe they just need to make it even. But this has to be a game where obviously Seth Trimble plays at a high level. But can Kyan Evans give you that scoring lift he gave you against Florida State where he scored 15 points? Can Derek Dixon be the guy off the bench that we were kind of beating down the door for him to become a starter just not too long ago? And then can Jonathan Powell, who I consider a backcourt player, even though he plays that 3 spot a lot, can he provide a lift off the bench as well, primarily with his perimeter shooting and his ability, I think, to be a difference maker as an individual on-ball defender in the half court that does get to the backboard at a pretty good rate for his size. It'll go a long way, because look, SMU's backcourt is good. Boopie Miller is as good as a guard there is in this conference. And so, you know, Seth Trimble, his biggest contribution to this game might be what he does defensively. Might not even be him scoring 20 points like he did against Florida State the other night, but you're going to need scoring production from that backcourt in some capacity, whether it is Trimble or a combination of Trimble and Evans, Trimble and Dixon, Trimble and Powell, so on and so forth. You know, this is the area of the team we feel the most uneasy about because of how inconsistent the play has been, most notably from Kyan Evans. But they're going to need their backcourt to play at a high level if they want to come away with this win on the road.
Yeah, this is where you need Kyan Evans to carry over the performance that he had on Tuesday night in the Smith Center against Florida State. Maybe that was the one that got him back on track. You need some of those catch and shoot opportunities for him. I think that's going to be important. And the one guy that I think, not a lot of people are going to talk about because they just don't know what exactly his role is going to be for this team moving forward is Luka Bogovac needs to bounce back in this one as well. You need to see a strong performance from him in response to what we saw the other night. And that means not forcing things on the offensive end of the floor. That means just taking ultimately what he's given at times and really, being a guy that allows Seth Trimble to really handle things on the offensive end. It feels like whenever he gets the basketball, he feels like he has to control everything that's going on that end of the floor. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think you've got someone that can set you up very well in Trimble, someone that's actually been pretty good in setting the table at times this year, especially from an assist standpoint, in Kyan Evans. So don't do too much if you're Luka Bogovac. Slow down, breathe, let the game come to you and take what's ultimately there in this game. And then Jonathan Powell, you'd like for him to have one of those days off the bench where he knocks down 2, maybe 3 threes from the outside. He brings that energy on the defensive end of the floor and just finds a way to really impact the game. I'm not saying you need the 17-point performance that he had earlier in non-conference play, but can you put together, maybe get into double-digit scoring in this game and create a couple of turnovers on the defensive end of the floor against this SMU team that's going to be playing at a high pace. I think that's what you're looking for from Carolina's backcourt. And, that's one of the things that, when it comes to outplaying them, everybody's going to be looking for scoring and how does Carolina match up in that area. If Carolina's backcourt is able to defend at a high rate, though, in this one, even if they do end up, if the backcourt ends up outscoring Carolina's backcourt, I think it still would give you a chance because you know that your front court is going to be able to have a very successful day, you would hope, against a team in SMU that just does not have a lot of size. So that's an area that you should be able to attack throughout in this game. And so it's just about the backcourt, even being even with what SMU is able to do and limiting some of the effects that SMU's group has on the game, not letting them go completely crazy in this one, like some teams have let them do in non-conference play.
Will be interesting to see, does Jonathan Powell get the start over Luka Bogovac? Does Schubert maybe give Luka one more chance? And if he does, how those minutes do get divvied up over the course of 40 minutes tomorrow afternoon. The last key to the game I wrote down, you need to dominate or at least control the special teams. And the special teams are points at the foul line, second chance points off offensive rebounds, points off turnovers, and points in the fast break. The free throw shooting, this is a game Carolina goes 64% from the foul line and they get beat. That'll be a reason why. Mm-hmm. They've got to start shooting 75% or better from the charity stripe. Offensive rebounds. I think one thing about this team is Carolina's going to give up rebounds. Are you going to give up points on those possessions as well? There were a few possessions the other night where they gave up 3 or 4 offensive rebounds, but they're able to still come away and not give up a basket. Will that happen in this game with a team that's going to look to pound the ball inside even after they grab their misses, turnovers? That's going to be a big thing. Can you limit yours and not give them as many points? And then transition points, they're going to be really key. Carolina got 20 of them the other night. It's a big reason why they scored 79 points on a night where they shot 43% from the field, 30% from behind the three-point line. As I mentioned, SMU is going to want to look to run, so this game should have a natural flow to it where Carolina could get some easy, 6 to 8 points in transition. But I think those are areas secondarily after all the primary stuff that even if Carolina doesn't maybe dominate, if they are at least controlling or competing in those areas, would go along with them coming away with a road victory.
Yeah, I think, this is one of those games where you've got to be able to take care of the basketball at a high rate, make sure that this is not a team that's able to create a lot of turnovers off of you. I think that's probably the most important area going into this game, as it was stressed going into the game against Florida State. From there, as you mentioned, I think you get into, some of the other areas like the fast break points. I thought that was incredibly important the other night, that Carolina was able to start getting up and down the floor at a pretty high rate. That's something that Seth Trimble, we know, is capable of doing. And he said to me the other night when I asked him a question about it, that is the fabric of Carolina basketball. That's one of the staples of Carolina basketball, and we need to make sure that we're doing that. That's what you want to see in this game. If SMU wants to play that tempo style pace, well, then that's fine. Let's play that pace because Carolina is more than capable of doing that. And then free throw percentage, incredibly important for Carolina in this game, that they hit their free throws, because the team on the other side is 35th in college basketball in terms of free throw percentage at 77%. So when they get to the line, they don't miss, including Boopy Miller, who's shooting 92% from the foul line. That's a guy that's going to get there probably more often than anybody else because of how aggressive he is going to the basket. When your guys get there, you have to be able to knock down those foul shots, because that's one area that we could come back here. And if Carolina loses, I guarantee you that's going to be one of the areas that we could look at and use for our stat of the game that ultimately leads to Carolina losing. So it's important that they get better in that area and improve as they go throughout the season, and that they do everything else that they need to do in the special areas of this game to be able to control it, because this is a team that, as we mentioned, likes to score the basketball. If you take care of all those other areas, then I think Carolina will be able to outscore them and find a way to win this game.
All right, Carolina enters the game. They're given just a 45.3% chance to win. That, according to ESPN's analytics and their matchup predictor. They don't have the DraftKings line available, but regardless, ESPN's model has Carolina basically as the underdog entering this game. I'll let you go first. Who wins the game and why?
I think that's a little crazy that Carolina is considered the underdog in this game, because I think that Carolina is going to win this game. I think This is going to be one of those close ones. It's not shocking that, it's close to 50%, but I think that Carolina is a team that is playing really good basketball right now. Maybe not as well as some of the top teams in the country, but certainly in that second tier of teams in the country so far this year. I think that, with where Carolina is at confidence-wise, they're going to come into this game ready to go. I'm hoping that a guy like Kyan Evans, coming off the performance that he had in the game against Florida State, he's going to be able to carry that success over into this game. I think you're going to see more of Jonathan Powell, or very similar amount to what we saw from him the other night, and he's going to be very effective as he's been. I think Seth Trimble continues to play well, and most importantly, I don't think that SMU has a way to slow Carolina down inside. I'm a little worried about what they're going to be able to do in the paint. I think this is going to be a team that is going to be able to score a pretty significant amount of points in the paint, and we'll be frustrated with that area. I think this is a team that could pull down some offensive rebounds, and we'll be frustrated in that area as well, because those are some things that Carolina has struggled with so far this season, and when it comes to limiting opponents in those areas. But I do think that Carolina's size and length will really bother SMU when it comes down to crunch time. I think Caleb Wilson makes some plays down the stretch. Henry Vassar makes some plays down the stretch for Carolina, and they're able to find their way out with a victory. It's going to be close, but I think Carolina gets it done against SMU.
Yeah, I think Carolina wins as well, man. I really do. My belief in this team is getting to where it was with that team 2 years ago, where there was just a trust factor, home or away. You feel like Carolina was going to find a way to come away with the victory. I think Carolina's got the three best players on the court in this game. I would take Trimble, Vassar, and Wilson over Boopie Miller. And I think that's really going to be the difference. I think it's going to be a fun game. I think it's going to be a competitive game. Excited to see what that environment looks like for Carolina. It was really loud, really jam-packed for Duke a year ago. Duke went in there and won. I think Carolina's going to go in there and do the same and push that record to 14-1, get that fourth quad one victory, and really start to really drum up the conversation around this team as a legitimate threat, because I do think they've been vastly underrated through the first 2 months of the season. No matter what happens, we'll have you covered here and on the website, thesealtoughblog.com. The game preview will go up tomorrow morning. We'll get you ready for Carolina and SMU. We'll have you cover the game recap as well sometime tomorrow evening. Might be Anthony on recap duties because I've got to work tomorrow. So regardless, be on the lookout for all that full SMU coverage. And the website's up. It's a busy place again. The transfer portal open in college football. Bill Belichick, Michael Lombardi, that staff, they're busy setting visits for incoming transfers as they look to rebuild that roster and field a much more competitive team for next season. We'll have you covered with all the transfer portal news coming out of Carolina's football program. So get to the website, that's SealToughBlog.com, your home for the best coverage of Carolina basketball and Tar Heel football. As for the pod, you know where to find us by now. Every major podcasting platform, just search the Four Corners Podcast and we'll pop up. There, we encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any audio editions of the show. If you are a video consumer of the podcast, the best way to keep up to date with us, like and follow the Facebook page at Heel Tough Blog, subscribe to the YouTube channel at Heel Tough Blog, or follow me on Twitter at HTB_Josh. The second that we go live, you'll get a notification. You can jump in and be a part of the conversation. With that, guys, it is going to wrap up this edition of the show. I do want to thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank you guys for both watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.